You know the funniest thing about bullies? They swagger around like the whole damn world owes them a salute, right up until the world drops the check in their lap and says, "Pay up." I'm standing in the middle of what used to be Patricia Middleton's 60 grand dream kitchen. Italian marble under my boots. That Sub-Zero still humming. Everything else? Dead quiet. 3 hours ago, this was HOA headquarters, where Willowbrook's meanest Karen planned my funeral. Now the only sound is this court order crinkling in my hand. It says this 12-foot island, the Wolf Range, the entire master wing, half her $750,000 house, legally belongs to me. How does a retired E8 with an $89,000 inheritance end up owning half a McMansion? Easy. Patricia demanded a professional land survey to nail me for my dead uncle's ugly mailbox. The surveyor came back with the punchline of the century. Her palace sits 18 feet onto my land. 18 feet that swallow her kitchen, her closet bigger than my old barracks room, and the triple garage where her BMW used to sit while she screamed at me. The same woman who called me neighborhood trash just became my tenant. Rent's due on the 1st. Lock in. The next 8 minutes are going to show you how karma carries a tape measure. And she never misses a shot. 3 months back, I buried Uncle Joe and inherited his house. What I didn't know was I'd also inherited a war. Uncle Joe Thompson. 32 years Army Corps of Engineers, Bronze Star, the kind of NCO who could survey a property line with dental floss and nail it to the inch. His 1952 ranch sat on Maple Street like a blue-collar middle finger to every McMansion around it. Original cedar siding, functional everything, lawn mowed every Saturday. Nothing fancy, just honest shelter that had delivered 43 years of screw you to anyone who didn't like it. Cancer took him quick. Left me 89 grand, his tools, and a house worth maybe $250 in a neighborhood where teardowns sold for 6 figures. What he also left me was 43 years of refusing to kiss rich people's rings. Willowbrook used to be working class. Cops, teachers, electricians who built things and raised kids who said yes, sir. But gentrification creeps like cancer. First came lawyers buying fixer-uppers, then real estate agents flipping ranches into fake chateaus. Property taxes tripled. HOA fees jumped from $50 to $300. Working families got priced out, replaced by BMW drivers who called themselves neighborhood stewards. Ding dong. Day 3 after the funeral, I'm drowning in boxes when the doorbell delivers my welcome gift. Patricia Middleton stands on Uncle Joe's porch like she owns it. 5'6", salon highlights, gripping a leather portfolio like nuclear codes. "You must be Joseph's nephew, Patricia Middleton, HOA president and Prestige Realty agent. We need to discuss immediate compliance issues." Rustle of laminated paper. She hands me a violation notice. Official letterhead, embossed seal. Non-conforming mailbox structures violate Section 4.7 of updated covenants. Uncle Joe's basic black metal post, standing since Eisenhower, apparently violated aesthetic enhancement guidelines established 2019. Required earth tone materials consistent with neighborhood character. 30 days compliance. Daily $50 fines after. "Ma'am, that mailbox delivered mail before you hit middle school. Previous ownership doesn't supersede democratically established regulations." She talks like a legal computer. No warmth, just corporate speak designed to crush resistance. The association voted these standards following extensive community input sessions. Her house 3 doors down looks like a Tuscan villa explosion. Fake stone facade, decorative columns supporting nothing but ego, circular driveway big enough for a battalion. Her mailbox, hand-carved cedar monument with brass plates that cost more than Uncle Joe's pension. What happens if I don't comply? Daily fines accumulate at $50 until compliance or lien enforcement becomes necessary. Shark smile. We take neighborhood investment protection very seriously. Door slams. Soon as her BMW disappears, I do what soldiers do facing unknown terrain. Intelligence gathering first. Always gather intelligence first. Uncle Joe's basement office was command central for 40 years of meticulous record keeping. Filing cabinets with mortgage papers, deeds, tax assessments, utility easements. Everything organized, labeled, cross-referenced. But behind the water heater, one manila folder marked property lines, important, check if trouble starts, in his careful block lettering. Paper shuffling. Inside, original 1952 subdivision survey. Hand-drawn but engineer precise. Lot boundaries, setback requirements, drainage easements. Uncle Joe had highlighted specific measurements in yellow marker. Numbers that made my combat engineer brain ask dangerous questions about what was legal versus what was standing. Click whir of tape measure. I grab my Stanley and head outside. Property line to street. Survey says 42 feet. Tape confirms 42 even. Side boundaries. Survey shows 96 feet. Tape reads 96.3. Within tolerance. Then the big question. Distance from my back fence to Patricia's foundation wall. Original survey shows mandatory 22 feet between structures. My tape tells a different story. 19 feet, 8 inches actual distance. That's not measurement error. That's not settling. That's construction that ignored legal setback requirements. Phone buzz. Patricia texts. Friendly reminder. Mailbox compliance required by month end. Failure triggers automatic daily assessment schedule. I text back. Received. Researching full compliance options. What I don't tell her, I'm researching more than mailbox codes. Uncle Joe's folder has building permits, zoning applications, tax records back to Truman. Plus one handwritten note clipped to the survey. 2019 construction questionable. Check setbacks if they push you around. Love, Joe. Papers crinkle ominously. Uncle Joe knew something was fundamentally wrong with Patricia's construction project. Question was whether wrong meant expensive problem or catastrophic legal nightmare for the person who demanded surveys. That first violation notice was just Patricia's opening move in what she thought would be a quick victory. But she had no idea she'd just started a chess match with someone who'd spent 12 years learning how to demolish things professionally. And sometimes the best strategy against neighborhood bullies is giving them exactly what they think they want, especially when what they want might just destroy them. 2 weeks later, Patricia escalated from mailbox violations to full-scale warfare, and like most bullies, she picked the worst possible battlefield. The monthly HOA meeting at Willowbrook Community Center, folding chairs arranged like a tribunal. 23 homeowners pretending to care about landscaping standards while Patricia held court from behind the head table like Judge Judy with a real estate license. Next item on our agenda, Patricia announces, consulting her leather-bound folder like it contained state secrets. Ongoing compliance violations at 847 Maple Street. My address. Every head in the room swivels toward me like I'd farted in church. The property in question continues displaying non-conforming mailbox structures despite official notification. She clicks through PowerPoint slides on a borrowed projector. First slide, photo of Uncle Joe's mailbox. Second slide, before and after examples showing cedar monuments costing $3,000 minimum. Furthermore, she continues, warming up to her grand performance, recent inspection reveals additional potential violations. Fence placement appears inconsistent with required setback standards. This was news to me. My fence had been standing since Carter was president. Patricia advances to her next slide, aerial photo of my property with red arrows pointing at my back fence line. Preliminary measurements suggest encroachment into mandatory buffer zones established by county ordinance. Bullshit. I'd measured that fence line myself. But watching 23 neighbors nod along like sheep, I realized Patricia wasn't interested in facts. She was building a case for total destruction. Given the severity of these compounding violations, she says, leaning forward like a prosecutor demanding the death penalty, the board motions for immediate professional survey requirements. Property owner bears full cost of licensed surveyor assessment to determine exact compliance status. I stand up. Ma'am, that fence has been legal for 40 years. My uncle maintained every code requirement. Previous maintenance doesn't guarantee current compliance. Her smile could freeze antifreeze. Property standards evolve. What was acceptable in 1980 may not meet today's community enhancement requirements. Board member nods. Motion seconded. All in favor of mandatory professional survey at owner expense? 7 hands shoot up immediately. Patricia's voting block locked and loaded. Motion carries. Property owner has 30 days to provide licensed survey results or face escalated enforcement procedures. Meeting over. Neighbors file out without making eye contact. Classic suburbia. Nobody wants problems. Everybody wants property values protected, even if it means feeding their neighbors to HOA wolves. Patricia approaches me during cleanup, still wearing that predator smile. I've researched qualified surveyors. Professional assessment typically runs $3,500 minimum, but I'm sure a man of your background understands the importance of following proper procedures. She hands me a business card. Mitchell & Associates Land Surveying, licensed, bonded, very thorough. I recommend calling soon. Daily fines begin in 30 days. As she walks away, heels clicking like a countdown timer, I realize Patricia just made the biggest tactical error of her entitled life. She wanted a professional survey to destroy me. What she was about to get was a professional survey that would destroy everything she'd built her kingdom on. Because sometimes when bullies demand exactly what they think will finish you, they're actually handing you the ammunition to finish them. That night, I sat in Uncle Joe's basement office staring at his property lines important folder like it might contain the nuclear codes. Patricia had just handed me a $3,500 ultimatum, but something in my gut said Uncle Joe had left me more than old surveys and good intentions. I spread the 1952 subdivision plat across his workbench. Hand-drawn lines, precise measurements, official county recorder stamps. Uncle Joe had marked specific distances in yellow highlighter, but now I noticed something else. Red ink notations in the margins, calculations, measurements that didn't match the official numbers. Lot 847, actual survey 96.3 versus recorded 96.0. Uncle Joe's careful handwriting. Lot 849 construction exceeds setback allowance by estimated 18 to 20 feet. Lot 849. That was Patricia's address. My phone buzzed. Danny Rodriguez, my old Army buddy who worked at the county assessor's office. We'd served together in Afghanistan, shared enough foxholes to trust each other with our lives. Heard you inherited Joe's place. Danny's voice carried that familiar Brooklyn accent. How you holding up with the suburban life? Getting interesting? Listen, you still have access to building permit records? Depends what you need and why you need it. I explained Patricia's survey ultimatum, her accusations about my fence, the whole HOA power play. Danny whistled low. Brother, you just described every veteran's suburban nightmare. Yeah, I can pull permit histories. What's the address on your problem neighbor? 849 Maple Street, Willowbrook Estates. Construction completed 2019. Give me 24 hours. I'll see what the county files say about setback compliance during that build. Next call went to Rebecca Arden, a property attorney my VFW buddy recommended. Former Air Force JAG, specialized in boundary disputes and HOA overreach cases. Military discount applies, Rebecca said after I explained the situation. These HOA bullies think legal threats scare everyone. Sometimes they scare the wrong person. Email me everything, the violation notices, meeting minutes, any correspondence. I'll review for free, give you an honest assessment. What's your gut feeling about survey demands? Depends what the survey finds. If your property's clean and theirs isn't, suddenly you're not the one with problems. But professional surveys cost serious money. Make sure you're prepared for whatever they reveal. That's when Uncle Joe's final gift revealed itself. Tucked behind the 1952 survey, a business card for Thompson Surveying Services, licensed professional land surveyor, Uncle Joe's own company from his post-military career. Below that, a handwritten note. Emergency Survey Fund, CD account 4471 at First National. Use only if they push too hard. Make them regret it. Joe. The CD statement showed $22,000. Enough for the most thorough survey in county history. Patricia wanted a professional survey. She was about to get exactly what she asked for. And Uncle Joe was going to pay for every devastating inch of it. Mitchell & Associates arrived on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. Patricia had recommended them personally, which meant she expected them to find problems with my property. What she didn't expect was that I'd hired them to survey both properties simultaneously. Standard boundary verification runs $1,800, Dave Mitchell explained, setting up his transit equipment. But you requested comprehensive adjacent property analysis. That's $3,200 total. I handed him Uncle Joe's emergency fund check without blinking. Money's not the issue. Accuracy is. I need to know exactly where every boundary line sits, and I need documentation that would hold up in federal court. Dave nodded approvingly. 28 years doing this work, most people want cheap and fast. You want right and thorough, respect. By noon, Dave's assistant was driving survey stakes along my property lines while Dave himself focused on the critical measurement, distance between my back fence and Patricia's house foundation. "This is interesting," Dave muttered, checking his transit readings against the county plat. "Your fence line is exactly where it should be, dead nuts accurate to the 1952 survey." "And the house?" Dave looked up from his equipment with the expression of a man who'd just discovered buried treasure. "The house is a problem, a big problem." He handed me his field notes. "According to county records, minimum setback from your property line is 22 feet. This foundation sits 19 feet, 8 inches from your fence. But here's where it gets interesting." Dave walked me to the survey stakes marking my actual property boundary. "Your uncle's fence isn't on the property line, it's 3 feet inside his own property, which means this house foundation sits 16 feet, 8 inches from your actual boundary." My brain started processing numbers like a targeting computer. "How much of the house crosses the line?" "Approximately 18 feet of structure extends onto your property. Kitchen, master bedroom, attached garage. I'd estimate about 40% of the total footprint." Dave continued marking boundaries while I processed the magnitude of what we'd discovered. Patricia's $75,000 kitchen island sat on my land. Her master suite with the walk-in closet bigger than most apartments? Mine. The 3-car garage where she parked her BMW while planning my destruction? Also mine. How accurate are these measurements? Survey-grade GPS, laser transit, multiple verification points. Accurate to plus or minus 2 inches. This isn't a maybe situation. This house was built in significant violation of setback requirements. By 3 p.m., Dave had completed his documentation. Detailed plat maps, elevation certificates, photographic evidence, GPS coordinates, everything Patricia would need to understand that demanding this survey had just destroyed her. "One more question," I asked Dave as he packed his equipment. "What happens when someone builds a structure across a property line?" "Legally, couple options. Boundary adjustment if both parties agree, purchase of encroaching portion at fair market value, or forced sale of the entire property to resolve the encroachment." Forced sale? It's called partition. If someone builds on your land without permission, you can force them to buy you out or sell the whole property to settle the debt. Depends on state law, but encroachment, this significant, usually favors the property owner who got built on. I paid Dave his fee and requested expedited delivery of all survey documents. "How fast can I get certified copies?" "Thursday morning." "You planning legal action?" "I'm planning to give Patricia exactly what she asked for, a professional survey determining exact compliance status." That evening, I called Rebecca Arden with the survey results. 18 feet of encroachment? Rebecca's voice carried barely controlled excitement. "That's not a boundary dispute, that's a property acquisition case. In this state, you have clear grounds for adverse possession claims or forced partition." "What's my next move?" "We file quiet title action to establish clear ownership of the encroached portion. Then we offer them a choice: buy your land at fair market value or face partition proceedings." Patricia wanted to use a survey to destroy me. Instead, she'd just handed me the deed to half her house. Thursday morning, I hand-delivered Mitchell's survey results to Patricia's front door. Certified copies in a manila envelope, return receipt requested, professional courtesy at its finest. What happened next proved that some people respond to facts the way vampires respond to sunlight. Her lawyer called within 6 hours. "This is Jonathan Ashworth, representing Patricia Middleton regarding alleged property boundary discrepancies. My client disputes the accuracy of your recent survey and demands immediate cessation of any harassment or intimidation tactics." I put him on speaker while brewing coffee in what was technically my kitchen. "Harassment?" I delivered survey results she demanded through official HOA proceedings. Same surveyor she personally recommended. "The survey contains obvious errors that we intend to challenge through proper legal channels. Any attempt to claim ownership of established residential structures constitutes actionable interference with property rights." Interesting legal theory. What's your client's plan for the 18 feet of her house sitting on my land? Silence. Then, "We'll be in touch." By Friday, Patricia had gone full nuclear. Emergency HOA board meeting, no regular homeowners invited. She'd stacked the deck with her 3 closest allies, the Hendersons from Lot 845, who owed their pool permit approval to Patricia's influence, and Margaret Walsh, who'd gotten her fence variance approved after joining Patricia's inner circle. I wasn't officially invited, but this was America. I showed up anyway. "This is a closed session," Patricia announced when I walked into the community center. She sat behind the head table like a general planning the final assault. "Board members only." "Funny thing about emergency meetings," I replied, taking a seat in the back row. "State law requires reasonable notice to affected property owners. Since you're discussing my property, I'm reasonably affected." Her face flushed red enough to power a small aircraft. "We're discussing fraudulent survey claims and appropriate legal responses." "Perfect." I brought backup copies of the survey for everyone. I distributed Mitchell's certified plat maps to each board member. Detailed measurements, GPS coordinates, photographic evidence, professional engineer's seal. Hard to argue with math when it's stamped by a state-licensed surveyor. Board member Henderson squinted at the drawings like they were written in ancient Sanskrit. "These numbers, they're saying Patricia's house extends 18 feet onto my property," I finished helpfully. "Kitchen, master bedroom, garage, pretty much everything except her front entrance and guest bathroom." Margaret Walsh looked like she'd swallowed a live grenade. "This can't be right. Patricia's construction was professionally managed. All permits were approved." "Permits can be approved incorrectly," I explained patiently. "That's why we have surveys, to determine what actually got built versus what was supposed to get built." Patricia finally found her voice. "This is clearly a fraudulent document designed to intimidate board proceedings. I'm recommending immediate legal action against this harassment campaign." "Harassment?" I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Ma'am, you demanded this survey through official HOA vote. I paid for the survey you requested. Now you're calling the results fraudulent because you don't like the facts?" Henderson was still studying the survey maps. "Patricia, these measurements look pretty detailed. GPS coordinates, elevation certificates, professional seals." "Obviously fabricated," Patricia snapped. "I've already contacted county zoning to report this fraudulent documentation." That's when I played my ace card. "Actually, I saved you the trouble. Already filed copies with the county recorder's office this morning. Public record now. Anyone can verify the measurements independently." You could hear a pin drop in that community center. Margaret Walsh was doing mental math about her own property boundaries. Henderson was probably wondering if his pool was legally compliant. Patricia was realizing she'd just made a very public accusation of survey fraud against state-certified documentation. "Furthermore," I continued, warming to my subject, "I've scheduled a meeting with Rebecca Arden, property attorney, to discuss legal options for resolving this encroachment situation. Apparently there are several approaches available under state law." Patricia's voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "Are you threatening legal action against this board? I'm informing the board that your house sits on my property, and we need to resolve that situation according to applicable law. You wanted professional verification of property boundaries. Well, now we have professional verification." Emergency session ended 10 minutes later with no official board action. Patricia couldn't rally votes for anything when half her allies were questioning their own property compliance, but Patricia wasn't finished. Sunday morning, I woke up to find orange spray paint across my front door. "Surveyor Scammer" in block letters. My mailbox, the same mailbox that started this whole mess, had been knocked over during the night. Monday brought a formal complaint to the county zoning office alleging fraudulent survey documentation filed with malicious intent. Patricia was claiming I'd bribed Mitchell to falsify measurements. Tuesday delivered a cease and desist letter from Ashworth's law firm threatening defamation action if I continued spreading false claims about established residential property boundaries. By Wednesday, Patricia had launched a social media campaign. Neighborhood alert, aggressive new resident using fake documents to harass longtime homeowners. The Willowbrook Estates Facebook group lit up with concerned neighbors sharing stories about property line scammers and survey fraud schemes. But Patricia had made one critical error in her escalation strategy. She'd gone public with accusations that could be independently verified. Survey measurements don't lie, county records don't fabricate themselves, and state-licensed engineers don't risk their professional credentials for neighborhood feuds. By Thursday evening, 3 other neighbors had quietly contacted Mitchell and Associates to request their own boundary surveys. Apparently, Patricia's accusations had made everyone suddenly curious about their own property compliance. Sometimes the best way to handle bullies is to let them hang themselves with their own rope. Patricia was weaving that noose faster than I could have managed alone. Patricia's next move proved that desperate people do desperate things. And desperate rich people do desperate illegal things with expensive help. Friday morning, I'm drinking coffee and reviewing Rebecca Arden's legal strategy when I hear power tools in my backyard. Through the kitchen window, I see 3 guys in Middleton construction uniforms attacking my fence with reciprocating saws. I grab my phone, start recording, and head outside. "Morning, gentlemen. Mind explaining why you're destroying my fence?" The crew leader, a thick guy with "supervisor" embroidered on his shirt, doesn't even look up from cutting fence posts. "Work order from the property owner, removing non-compliant fencing structures." "I'm the property owner. I didn't authorize any fence removal." Now he looks up confused. "Ma'am said this fence violates setback requirements. We got permits." I keep filming while calling 911. "You're destroying private property based on orders from someone who doesn't own it. That's called vandalism." 20 minutes later, Officer Mike Patterson arrives. Marine veteran, lives 2 streets over, knows bullshit when he sees it. He reviews the work order, checks my property deed, examines the survey documentation. "Crew needs to stop immediately," Patterson tells the supervisor. "This fence sits entirely on private property owned by the complainant. Continue cutting, and you're looking at felony property destruction charges." The crew packs up fast. Supervisor hands me the work order on his way out, signed by Patricia Middleton, authorized by HOA Enforcement Authority, claiming my fence violated emergency safety standards requiring immediate removal. Patricia had hired contractors to destroy my fence using fake authority. That's when I realized we'd moved beyond neighbor disputes into criminal territory. But Patricia wasn't finished escalating. Monday brought a surprise inspection from City Code Enforcement. Tuesday delivered a visit from County Environmental Health. Wednesday featured the fire marshal checking my non-compliant electrical installations. Every day brought a new official with a clipboard, investigating anonymous complaints filed against my property. The pattern was obvious. Patricia was weaponizing every municipal department she could reach, hoping to bury me in violations, fines, and compliance costs. Classic bureaucratic warfare designed to break people who can't afford lawyers. Problem was, she picked the wrong target. 12 years of military service teaches you to document everything, follow procedures exactly, and never give bureaucrats ammunition to use against you. My property was squared away like a Marine barracks ready for inspection. Every inspector left empty-handed. No violations found, no fines issued, no compliance problems discovered. But the harassment campaign revealed Patricia's growing desperation. She was burning political capital with city departments, filing frivolous complaints, and making enemies of municipal workers who didn't appreciate being used as personal enforcers for HOA feuds. Thursday brought the big escalation. I'm reviewing Rebecca's partition lawsuit draft when Danny Rodriguez calls from the county assessor's office. "Brother, you need to hear this. Patricia Middleton just filed for emergency property tax reassessment on your lot. Claims the survey results indicate your property boundaries are incorrectly recorded, affecting her tax liability. She's trying to change my property boundaries through the tax office? Gets better. She's also filed a formal complaint alleging you bribed the surveyor to falsify boundary measurements. County's opening an investigation into Mitchell & Associates professional licensing. This was war. Patricia was attacking my surveyor's professional reputation, trying to invalidate his measurements through regulatory intimidation. If she succeeded in getting Mitchell's license suspended, my survey results would become legally worthless. But Patricia had made a crucial error. She was assuming Mitchell was some small-time operator vulnerable to political pressure. What she didn't know was that Dave Mitchell had surveyed half the commercial developments in the county over the past 20 years. His client list included 3 city council members, 2 county commissioners, and the mayor's office. Friday morning, Mitchell called me directly. "Wanted you to know, Patricia Middleton's complaint triggered a formal review of my work. Department sent an independent surveyor to verify our measurements." How worried should I be? Not at all. Independent verification confirmed our measurements to within 1 inch. Department's closing the complaint, and they're not happy about frivolous accusations against licensed professionals. But the week's biggest revelation came from an unexpected source. Rebecca Arden had been researching property records and discovered something that changed everything. The 2019 building permits for Patricia's house, Rebecca explained during our Friday meeting. They show approved construction plans with proper setback compliance. 22 feet from your property line, exactly as required. So what went wrong? Construction supervisor was Patricia's brother-in-law, Tony Middleton. Family business. Appears they moved the foundation 18 feet closer to your boundary without filing amended plans or getting zoning approval. Deliberately? Had to be. You don't accidentally shift a foundation 18 feet. They saved money by using a smaller lot footprint. Probably figured nobody would ever measure carefully enough to notice. What's that mean legally? Means this wasn't construction error. This was intentional violation of approved building plans. That makes Patricia's encroachment a deliberate trespass, not an innocent mistake. How does that affect our case? Strengthens it enormously. Courts treat intentional boundary violations much more harshly than accidental ones. We can pursue punitive damages, not just property value recovery. Patricia's escalation campaign had backfired spectacularly. Her attacks on my surveyor confirmed the accuracy of our measurements. Her bureaucratic harassment documented her vindictive behavior. Her attempt to use family contractors for illegal fence destruction created a criminal evidence trail. Most importantly, her desperate tactics had pushed Rebecca to investigate deeper, revealing that Patricia's entire house was built through deliberate permit fraud. Sometimes when you're dealing with bullies, the best strategy is letting them dig their own graves. Patricia had just hit bedrock. The turning point came when Sarah Williams called, local reporter for the Willowbrook Gazette, 28 years covering suburban politics, knows for stories that make city councils nervous. I'm investigating complaints about HOA overreach affecting military veterans, Sarah explained during our Tuesday morning phone call. Your name came up multiple times. Mind sharing your side? I'd learned to be careful with reporters, but something in Sarah's voice suggested she was hunting bigger game than neighborhood gossip. What kind of complaints? 3 different veterans contacted me about harassment campaigns, excessive fines, frivolous violations, targeting people who can't afford legal defense. Your situation with Patricia Middleton sounds like the worst case. I invited Sarah over that afternoon, showed her the timeline. Uncle Joe's death, the mailbox violation, the survey demand, Patricia's escalation campaign. Laid out the documented evidence like a military briefing. Survey results, legal correspondence, photos of fence destruction, records of frivolous complaints. Sarah took notes like she was transcribing a war crimes trial. This is incredible. She demanded the survey that proved her house violates setback requirements. Gets better. Turns out her construction violated approved building plans, deliberately moved the foundation to save money, never filed amended permits. Can I verify this independently? County Building Department, public records. Rebecca Arden has copies of everything. Sarah spent Wednesday fact-checking. Called Mitchell & Associates, interviewed the independent surveyor who verified our measurements, reviewed county files on Patricia's building permits. By Thursday, she had confirmed every detail. Friday morning, the Willowbrook Gazette published, "When HOAs attack, local veteran fights back against property rights abuse." Front page, above the fold, complete with aerial photos showing Patricia's house extending onto my property. The article was devastating for Patricia. Sarah had done her homework, documenting the fence destruction, the frivolous complaints, the survey fraud allegations that county officials called completely without merit. Most damaging was the sidebar explaining partition law and how intentional boundary violations could result in forced property sales. By Friday afternoon, the story had been picked up by 3 regional newspapers and 2 local TV stations. Saturday brought a camera crew from Channel 7 News doing a follow-up segment on HOA abuse against veterans. Sunday morning, my phone started ringing. Veterans organizations offering support, legal assistance, media coordination. VFW Post 447 invited me to speak at their Tuesday meeting about defending property rights against HOA tyranny. Monday delivered the breakthrough I'd been hoping for. Danny Rodriguez called with inside information from the county assessor's office. Remember Patricia's complaint about your property boundaries? Well, turns out she's been claiming incorrect square footage on her tax assessments for 5 years. Based on your survey results, she's been underreporting her actual lot usage by about 30%. How much money are we talking about? Back taxes, penalties, interest, probably $15,000 minimum. County's opening a formal investigation into tax assessment fraud. Tuesday's VFW meeting drew 47 veterans and their families. I presented the facts, timeline, documentation, legal options. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "This is exactly the kind of abuse we came home to deal with," growled Frank Morrison, Vietnam veteran and retired contractor. HOAs thinking they can bulldoze people who serve this country. It motion passed unanimously. VFW Post 447 would provide public support, legal fund assistance, and media coordination for veterans facing HOA harassment. They'd already identified 3 other cases in surrounding counties. Wednesday brought the social media explosion. Facebook groups, veteran forums, neighborhood watch networks sharing the Willowbrook Gazette article. HOA abuse trending locally on Twitter. Patricia's own neighborhood Facebook group turned against her as homeowners realized they might face similar survey challenges. Most importantly, the public attention had neutralized Patricia's bureaucratic warfare campaign. City departments stopped responding to her frivolous complaints. County officials were asking hard questions about her building permit compliance. Municipal workers who'd been pressured into harassment inspections were now documenting Patricia's abuse of the complaint system. By Thursday evening, I had 23 messages of support from neighbors who'd previously avoided taking sides. Turns out a lot of people had been quietly intimidated by Patricia's HOA reign, but were afraid to speak up individually. Sarah Williams called that evening with an update. Channel 7 wants to do a follow-up segment. 3 more newspapers picked up the story, and I got a call from the state attorney general's office. They're investigating HOA abuse patterns statewide. Patricia had wanted to destroy me through isolation and bureaucratic pressure. Instead, her escalation tactics had created a public platform that exposed her methods and turned community opinion decisively against her. Sometimes the best defense against bullies is sunlight, and Patricia was about to discover that her HOA kingdom couldn't survive public scrutiny. Rebecca Arden called Wednesday morning with news that would flip this entire situation upside down. "I've been researching partition law precedents, and we're sitting on a legal goldmine." Rebecca's voice carried barely controlled excitement. Patricia's encroachment isn't just a boundary dispute. Under state property law, we can force partition of her entire property. Explain that in civilian terms. Partition means when someone builds on your land without permission, you can demand either immediate buyout at fair market value or forced sale of their entire property to recover damages. Since Patricia's house straddles the property line, we can claim ownership of the portion on your land and force her to negotiate. I was processing the implications while looking out my kitchen window at Patricia's palace. How much of her house are we talking about? Based on Mitchell's survey, approximately 40% of total square footage. Kitchen, master suite, garage, market value of just that portion would be around $300,000. And if she refuses to buy me out? Then we petition the court to order partition by sale. Her entire property gets auctioned to satisfy the encroachment debt. Proceeds split based on ownership percentages. Rebecca had already drafted the legal filing. Quiet title action establishing my ownership of the 18-foot strip, followed by partition demand requiring Patricia to either purchase my portion at appraised value or face forced sale of her entire property. What's our timeline? I can file tomorrow. State law requires 30-day notice before partition proceedings begin. Gives Patricia 1 month to negotiate or prepare for property auction. Do it. Thursday afternoon, certified process server delivered our legal papers to Patricia's front door. Quiet title action and partition demand, 23 pages of legal documentation that essentially informed Patricia she now had 30 days to buy me out or lose her house. The response was immediate and predictable. Patricia went ballistic. Friday morning brought 3 calls from Jonathan Ashworth, her attorney, each progressively more desperate. First call offered to discuss reasonable boundary adjustment. Second call proposed modest compensation for alleged encroachment. Third call demanded emergency mediation to avoid unnecessary litigation costs. "Your client built on my land deliberately," I told Ashworth during our 4th conversation. "Survey proves it, building permits prove it, construction records prove it, fair market value or forced sale. Those are her options. This is extortion. You're demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars based on disputed survey measurements. County verified the measurements independently. 3 separate professional confirmations. Your client's house sits on my property. State law is clear about remedies." Saturday brought Patricia's first settlement offer, $25,000 for a quitclaim deed releasing all boundary claims. Rebecca laughed when I forwarded the offer. $300,000 worth of house for $25,000? Patricia's either delusional or hoping you don't understand property values. Monday delivered Patricia's second offer. $50,000 plus mutual agreement to drop all outstanding HOA violations. She's still trying to trade my land for HOA amnesty, I told Rebecca, like she's doing me a favor by not harassing me anymore. Counteroffer time, fair market appraisal of the encroached portion, plus attorney fees, plus penalties for intentional trespass, should come to around $350 total. Tuesday morning, Ashworth called with panic in his voice. Your demands are unreasonable. Patricia can't afford $350,000 for what amounts to 18 feet of yard space. Then she can't afford to keep a house that's built on my yard space. Partition law exists exactly for this situation. You're talking about destroying someone's home over a property line dispute. I'm talking about recovering stolen land through legal remedies. Patricia had 43 years to survey before building. She chose to gamble instead. Wednesday brought the revelation that changed everything. Danny Rodriguez called with intelligence from the county building department. Remember how Patricia's brother-in-law handled construction? Well, turns out Tony Middleton has been under investigation for permit fraud on 3 other projects. Federal Contractors Fraud Task Force has been building a case for 8 months. How does that affect our situation? Patricia's house might be evidence in a federal criminal case. If Tony Middleton gets indicted for construction fraud, Patricia could face charges as a co-conspirator. Thursday evening, Rebecca called with final strategic assessment. Patricia's running out of options. Her property's now flagged for federal investigation. She can't sell or refinance with a partition lawsuit pending, and market analysis shows her house value drops below mortgage balance if she loses 30% of the structure. What's her best move? Negotiate settlement before partition proceedings begin. Pay fair market value for your land, take the financial hit, hope the federal investigation doesn't implicate her directly. And if she refuses, then in 30 days we petition for forced sale. Her entire property gets auctioned. She loses everything. Patricia had demanded a survey to destroy me. Instead, she'd triggered partition law that gave me ownership rights to half her house. The woman who called me neighborhood trash was now facing the choice between buying my land at market rate or losing her palace entirely. Sometimes justice comes with a measuring tape and a court order. The partition hearing was scheduled for Thursday, October 12th at 9 a.m. in County Superior Court. Patricia had 28 days to negotiate. She chose to fight instead. Walking into that courthouse felt like stepping into a different war. This wasn't neighborhood politics anymore. This was property law at its most brutal, where decades of someone's life could get auctioned off to satisfy a legal debt they created through their own arrogance. Judge Margaret Foster presided, 30-year veteran of property disputes, real estate law, boundary conflicts that destroyed families and bankrupted developers. Her courtroom had seen everything from million-dollar commercial disputes to trailer park feuds over fence posts. We're here for partition proceedings in the matter of Thompson versus Middleton, Judge Foster announced. Plaintiff claims ownership of 18 feet of defendant's residential property based on boundary encroachment. Defendant disputes survey accuracy and claims adverse possession rights. Rebecca Arden stood up, carrying 3 boxes of documentation that represented 4 months of legal preparation. Your Honor, this case involves deliberate construction of residential structures across established property boundaries in violation of approved building permits and county setback requirements. Patricia's attorney, Jonathan Ashworth, looked like a man defending the Titanic against icebergs. Your Honor, my client has maintained her property in good faith for 5 years based on professional construction and county-approved permits. Any boundary discrepancies result from surveying errors, not intentional encroachment. Judge Foster reviewed our preliminary evidence while the courtroom filled with spectators. Front row. VFW Post 447 representatives, 3 veterans in dress uniforms, Sarah Williams with her camera crew, and 2 county commissioners who'd been following the case through media coverage. Back rows, neighbors from Willowbrook Estates, curiosity seekers, property lawyers watching to see how partition law would apply to suburban residential disputes. Mr. Thompson, Judge Foster addressed me directly, please explain how you discovered this alleged encroachment. I stood up, military bearing intact. Your Honor, Defendant Patricia Middleton demanded mandatory professional survey through HOA enforcement proceedings. She claimed my property violated setback requirements and required proof of compliance. And the survey results? Survey performed by Mitchell & Associates, licensed professional land surveyor, revealed defendant's house extends 18 feet onto my property. Kitchen, master bedroom, attached garage. Ms. Middleton, Judge Foster turned to Patricia, who looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past month. Did you indeed demand this survey through official proceedings? Patricia stood reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. But the survey contains obvious errors that we intend to prove through independent verification. Judge Foster's eyebrows rose slightly. You demanded a survey, then claim the results are fraudulent because they don't support your position? Ashworth jumped up. Your Honor, we believe the survey measurements were deliberately falsified to support plaintiff's fraudulent property claims. Strong accusation, Counselor. Do you have evidence supporting survey fraud allegations? We're prepared to present alternative measurements that contradict— Your Honor, Rebecca interrupted smoothly. Defendant's fraud allegations were already investigated by County Building Department. Independent surveyor confirmed Mitchell and Associates measurements to within 1-inch accuracy. Judge Foster looked annoyed. Mr. Ashworth, are you claiming the County Building Department participated in survey fraud conspiracy? No, Your Honor. We're simply questioning the accuracy. Move on to substantive issues. Ms. Arden, please present your evidence of encroachment. Rebecca began systematically destroying Patricia's defense. Original 1952 subdivision plat showing required setbacks. Patricia's 2019 building permits indicating proper boundary compliance. Mitchell's survey proving actual construction violated approved plans by 18 feet. Your Honor, this isn't accidental boundary confusion. Construction supervisor was defendant's brother-in-law. They deliberately moved the foundation closer to plaintiff's boundary to maximize usable lot space without filing amended permits. Objection, Ashworth called out. Speculation about construction supervisor's intentions. Sustained. Stick to documented evidence. Rebecca pulled out Tony Middleton's construction records. Construction supervisor's own notes indicate foundation placement adjusted for optimal lot utilization. No amended permits filed. No zoning variance requested. Judge Foster studied the construction documents carefully. Ms. Middleton, can you explain why your construction supervisor moved the foundation 18 feet from approved plans without filing amended permits? Patricia looked like she was drowning. Your Honor, I trusted professional contractors to handle permit compliance. Any deviations were made without my knowledge. You're claiming ignorance of construction on your own property? I relied on licensed professionals to ensure legal compliance. Rebecca sensed blood in the water. Your Honor, defendant personally supervised daily construction activities. Neighbor testimony confirms defendant was present during foundation work and specifically instructed placement closer to property boundaries. Objection, hearsay evidence. Your Honor, Rebecca continued, defendant's own text messages to construction supervisor reference maximizing buildable space and getting as close to boundary as possible without triggering variance requirements. Judge Foster looked at Patricia with undisguised skepticism. Ms. Middleton, did you instruct construction to maximize buildable space by approaching boundary limits? Patricia's voice barely registered above a whisper. I may have made suggestions about efficient space utilization. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Ashworth looked like he wanted to disappear under his table. Your Honor, Rebecca pressed forward, based on deliberate boundary encroachment, plaintiff requests partition by sale under State Property Law Section 12.4.7. Defendant's entire property should be auctioned to satisfy encroachment damages. Objection, Ashworth practically shouted. Partition by sale is extreme remedy reserved for cases where negotiated settlement is impossible. Judge Foster turned to me. Mr. Thompson, have you attempted to negotiate reasonable settlement with defendant? Yes, Your Honor. We offered to sell the encroached portion at fair market value. Defendant offered $25,000 for land valued at approximately $300,000. Ms. Middleton, is that accurate? Patricia looked defeated. Your Honor, $300,000 exceeds my financial capability. But you can afford to maintain a $750,000 house built partially on stolen land. Objection. Stolen land is prejudicial characterization. Sustained, but barely. Ms. Middleton, how do you propose resolving this encroachment? Patricia whispered something to Ashworth, who stood up reluctantly. Your Honor, defendant requests 60-day continuance to explore financing options for land purchase. Judge Foster consulted her calendar. Ms. Arden, what's plaintiff's position on continuance request? Rebecca stood confidently. Your Honor, defendant has had 4 months to arrange financing. Continued delay only increases plaintiff's damages and prevents resolution. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, defendant's property is now subject to federal investigation for construction permit fraud. Additional delay may complicate resolution if criminal charges affect property ownership. Judge Foster's attention sharpened. Federal investigation. Yes, Your Honor. Construction supervisor Tony Middleton is under indictment for contractor fraud on multiple projects. Defendant's property may be evidence in criminal proceedings. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Patricia looked like she might faint. Ashworth was frantically scribbling notes, probably calculating how to distance his client from federal criminal investigation. Judge Foster banged her gavel for silence. Given the complexity of this matter and potential criminal implications, I'm ordering immediate resolution. Ms. Middleton, you have two options. Option 1. Within 30 days, purchase plaintiff's encroached land at independently appraised fair market value, plus attorney fees, plus statutory penalties for intentional trespass. Option 2. This court will order partition by sale. Your entire property will be auctioned. Proceeds will be distributed based on legitimate ownership percentages. Judge Foster leaned forward. Ms. Middleton, do you understand these options? Patricia nodded weakly. Do you need time to consult with counsel about financing arrangements? Ashworth stood up. Your Honor, my client requests independent property appraisal to determine fair market value of the encroached portion. Granted. Court will order professional appraisal within 15 days. Settlement negotiations must conclude within 30 days of appraisal completion. Judge Foster banged her gavel. This hearing is adjourned. Ms. Middleton, I strongly suggest you explore every possible financing option. Partition by sale will likely result in total loss of your property. Walking out of that courthouse, surrounded by veterans, reporters, and neighbors who'd been following this case for months, felt like victory march after a long campaign. Patricia had demanded a survey to destroy me. Instead, she'd triggered legal proceedings that gave me ownership rights to half her house and potential claim to her entire property through partition sale. The woman who'd called me neighborhood trash was now 30 days away from losing everything she'd built through her own arrogance and greed. Sometimes justice takes a while to arrive, but when it shows up, it carries a court order and a measuring tape. The property appraisal came back at $312,000 for my 18-foot strip. With attorney fees and statutory penalties, Patricia owed me $357,000 for land she'd stolen through deliberate construction fraud. She paid within 24 days. The settlement meeting happened at Rebecca's law office on a rainy Tuesday morning. Patricia showed up looking like she'd aged a decade, accompanied by Ashworth and a new attorney specializing in real estate transactions. The money came from a second mortgage against her property, turning her dream house into a financial nightmare that would take 15 years to pay off. Certified bank draft for $357,000, the transaction attorney announced, sliding the check across Rebecca's conference table. Includes purchase price, legal fees, penalties, and recording costs. I stared at that check for a long moment. More money than Uncle Joe had saved in 43 years of military service. More money than I'd ever expected to see from a mailbox violation notice. But something felt incomplete about just taking Patricia's money and walking away. This whole fight had started because she couldn't tolerate working-class people in her gentrified neighborhood. Taking her cash wouldn't change that attitude or help the next veteran who faced HOA harassment. Before we finalize this, I said, I want to add one more condition. Ashworth looked nervous. The settlement agreement is already signed. Not about money, about community responsibility. I looked directly at Patricia, who hadn't spoken during the entire meeting. I want Patricia to resign from the HOA board and support my nomination of Frank Morrison as replacement board member. Frank Morrison was the Vietnam veteran from VFW Post 447 who'd been organizing support for veterans facing HOA harassment. Retired contractor, neighborhood resident for 12 years, exactly the kind of working-class leader Patricia had been trying to eliminate. That's not part of our agreement, Ashworth protested. Then we can proceed to partition sale instead, Rebecca replied smoothly. Your client's choice. Patricia finally found her voice. I'll resign from the board, but I can't control who gets elected as replacement. You can support Frank's nomination publicly. Recommend him to neighbors, vote for him yourself, encourage others to vote for him. Patricia looked at her attorneys like they might provide magical escape from this final humiliation. They offered nothing but expensive silence. Fine. I'll resign and support Morrison's nomination. Settlement completed, papers signed, money transferred. But the real work was just beginning. That afternoon, I called Frank Morrison with news about his unexpected HOA board nomination. Patricia Middleton just agreed to resign and support your election as replacement board member. Frank's laughter carried 30 years of military cynicism. From HOA harassment to board membership in 4 months? That's quite a promotion. Think you can handle HOA politics? Brother, I survived 3 tours in Vietnam and 40 years of government contracting. Suburban politics should be easy compared to that. Frank won the emergency board election by landslide vote. Turns out most Willowbrook residents had been quietly tired of Patricia's authoritarian management style, but were afraid to oppose her individually. Once she was neutralized, Democratic sentiment reasserted itself quickly. Frank's first board motion established the Uncle Joe Thompson Veterans Assistance Fund, using my settlement money to help military families facing HOA harassment, property disputes, or bureaucratic intimidation. Here's how this works, Frank announced at his first board meeting. Any veteran in this county facing HOA abuse gets free legal consultation, survey assistance, and financial support for fighting back. We're going to make sure Patricia's tactics never work against military families again. The fund started with my $357,000, but grew rapidly through community donations, VFW contributions, and grants from veterans organizations. Within 6 months, we'd helped 12 military families resolve HOA disputes, funded 8 property surveys that revealed boundary violations by HOA-connected developers, and provided legal assistance for 3 partition cases similar to mine. Most importantly, word spread through military networks that Willowbrook Estates had become a veteran-friendly community where HOA harassment wouldn't be tolerated. Property values stabilized as working-class military families moved in, bringing practical skills, community spirit, and respect for legitimate authority rather than petty tyranny. Patricia kept her house but lost her social standing. Neighbors who'd once sought her approval for property modifications now avoided her entirely. Her real estate business suffered as buyers learned about her legal troubles. The federal investigation into Tony Middleton's construction fraud resulted in his indictment, though Patricia avoided criminal charges by cooperating with prosecutors. 6 months after settlement, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She looked smaller somehow, like defeat had physically diminished her. We nodded politely without speaking, 2 people who'd fought a war over 18 feet of property and learned that victory sometimes costs more than anyone expects to pay. But walking through Willowbrook Estates these days feels different. Kids playing in yards without worry about HOA violations, veterans working on their houses without harassment, neighbors talking to each other instead of filing complaints. Uncle Joe would have been proud. His nephew had taken the worst HOA bully in county history and turned her weapons into tools for protecting the next generation of military families. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's using their mistakes to build something better than what they tried to tear down. 1 year later, I'm grilling burgers in my backyard for the annual Uncle Joe Thompson Memorial Barbecue. 43 veterans and their families celebrating the man who taught me that sometimes you have to fight bullies with their own weapons. Frank Morrison's manning the beer cooler, wearing his HOA board member t-shirt like a badge of honor. Sarah Williams is interviewing 3 families we helped through the Veterans Assistance Fund. Danny Rodriguez brought his kids to play on the swing set I built where Patricia's fence destruction happened. The fund has grown to over $500,000. We've resolved 28 HOA harassment cases, prevented 6 forced home sales, and funded 17 property surveys that revealed boundary violations by developers who thought working families wouldn't fight back. 3 other counties have established similar programs modeled on our success. Patricia moved to Florida 6 months ago, sold her house to a young Marine family for exactly what she owed on her mortgages. The new owners, the Gonzalez family, joined our neighborhood watch program and volunteer with the Veterans Assistance Fund. Uncle Joe's mailbox still stands exactly where he placed it in 1982. Black metal post, standard USPS-approved design, delivering mail to families who understand that property rights aren't suggestions, and neighborhood bullies aren't invincible. Property lines matter. Know your boundaries, literally and legally. Document everything, trust but verify, and remember that sometimes the best way to handle HOA tyrants is giving them exactly what they ask for. And if you've got your own Patricia Middleton story, drop it in the comments. You might be surprised what those old property records can teach you about standing your ground.
That's all for today's HOA madness. If watching justice serve itself made your day, smash that like button, share your thoughts down below, and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.